Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for December 17th. December 17th is the 351st day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 14 days remaining until the end of the year. Today's word is lustrate. Lustrate. It means to purify by means of rituals or ceremonies, expiatory sacrifice, ceremonial washing, or some other ritual action, as in a soul lustrated in the baptismal waters. Another meaning of it is to remove undesirable people from an organization, especially in an abrupt or violent manner. This word comes to us through the Latin language, the Latin word lustrare, to make bright. Ultimately, it comes from the Indo-European root luke, L-E-U-K, light, which also gave us lunar, lunatic, light, lightning, lucid, illuminate, illustrate, translucent, lux, lynx, lucubrate, lute string, and lee. The earliest documented use of this word is 1623. Before we get started, I want to remind you that links to my research are included in the show notes. If you're curious about where did I get this or that bit of information, there are links in the show notes. And with that, we're going to get started today with this day in history with the year 1777, during the American Revolution, when France formally recognized the United States. In 1790, the Aztec calendar stone was discovered at El Zocalo in Mexico City. In 1835, the Second Great Fire of New York destroyed 50 acres, 200,000 square meters, of New York City's financial district. In 1862, during the American Civil War, General Ulysses S. Grant issued General Order No. 11, expelling Jews from parts of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky. In 1892, the first issue of Vogue was published. It first came out as a daily newspaper and eventually made its way to the monthly magazine it is now. 1903, the first airplane flies near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Orville and Wilbur Wright made the first successful flight in history of a self-propelled, heavier-than-air aircraft. Orville piloted the gasoline-powered, propeller-driven biplane, which stayed aloft for 12 seconds and covered 120 feet in its inaugural flight. In 1908, American chemist and academic Willard Libby was born on this day in 1908. He's noted for his role in the 1949 development of radiocarbon dating, a process which revolutionized archaeology and paleontology. For his contributions to the team that developed this process, Libby was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1960. He lived to the age of 71. 1938, Otto Hahn discovered the nuclear fission of the heavy element uranium, the scientific and technological basis of nuclear energy. 1941, Rear Admiral Husband E. Kimmel was relieved of his command of the U.S. Pacific Fleet as part of a shakeup of officers in the wake of the Pearl Harbor disaster. This is something you don't hear much about. I never heard this at all until I started today's research. Apparently, Rear Admiral Kimmel was a creature of habit, everything the same, all the time, and his apparent utter predictability made him vulnerable. As I read this about him, I was reminded of an insect called a golden digger wasp. This is a thread-waisted wasp that makes a nest in a hole in the ground, burrows a nest into the ground. She makes a hole about that big around, just big enough to get in and out. Once she's dug that burrow, she'll go out and capture a katydid, which is a little green insect that looks like a cross between a grasshopper and a cricket. She'll sting it just enough to stun it, but not enough to kill it, and then she brings it back to her burrow. She lays the katydid down on the ground right next to the opening of the burrow, and then she goes inside and inspects the cell where she's going to lay her egg. Once she's satisfied with her inspection, she comes back out to get the katydid. I've actually observed this behavior in nature. It's a fascinating thing to see. It looks like brilliant, thoughtful behavior. But here's the thing. If the katydid gets moved in any way, if it gets turned around or rolled over or, moved a few inches away, she can't quite figure that out. She'll return it to its original position, go back inside the burrow, re-inspect the cell, and then come back for the katydid. If, as an experiment, you were to decide to move the katydid when she's not looking, this process will replay as many times as you wish to repeat it. You'll get tired of playing this game way before she'll stop moving that katydid back where it was, going into the burrow to inspect the cell, and then coming back out. This behavior, which at first appears brilliantly thoughtful, is actually just an unthinking routine. In the golden digger wasp, it's considered a form of genetic determinism, and an adjective has been formed to describe this type of behavior, and that is Sphexis, as Phexish, Sphexish. This word was coined from the genus name of this wasp. This extremely predictable behavior, this Sphexishness, can lend itself to vulnerability, just as it did to Rear Admiral Kimmel when the Japanese decided to attack Pearl Harbor. He was so predictable that they knew when and where and how to hit him. So my advice is to shake things up once in a while. Be dependable. That's important. Be dependable, but not too predictable. 1944, the U.S. approves an end to internment of Japanese Americans. During World War II, U.S. Major General Henry C. Pratt issued Public Proclamation No. 21, declaring that effective January 2, 1945, Japanese American evacuees from the West Coast could return to their homes. On February 19th of 1942, 10 weeks after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the removal of any or all people from military areas as deemed necessary or desirable. The military in turn defined the entire West Coast, home to the majority of Americans of Japanese ancestry or citizenship, as a military area. By June, more than 110,000 Japanese Americans were relocated to remote internment camps built by the U.S. military in scattered locations around the country. For the next 2.5 years, many of these Japanese Americans endured extremely difficult living conditions and poor treatment by their military guards. During the course of World War II, 10 Americans were convicted of spying for Japan, but not one of them was of Japanese ancestry. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill to recompense each surviving internee with a tax-free check for $20,000 and an apology from the U.S. government. 1969, Project Blue Book. The United States Air Force officially closed its study of UFOs. I must say, there certainly are some unusual and unexplainable things that happen in the skies. Lights where they oughtn't be, flying in unexplainable patterns, and more. On the other hand, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? I don't know. My opinion is that Project Blue Book was created not so much to see what could be discovered, but more to debunk and quell any talk of UFOs. But that is just my opinion. We try to stay with facts here and not opinions, but you just got an opinion, so. 1975, Lynette Squeaky Fromme, sentenced to life for assassination attempt. A federal jury in Sacramento, California, sentenced Lynette Alice Fromme, or Fromme, also known as Squeaky Fromme, to life in prison for her attempted assassination of President Gerald R. Ford. She was released on parole in August of 2009 after serving nearly 34 years. 1979, stuntman Stan Barrett broke the sound barrier as a Hollywood stuntman. He blasted across a dry lake bed at California's Edwards Air Force Base in a rocket and missile-powered car, becoming the first man to travel faster than the speed of sound on land. Unfortunately, he did not set an official record. The radar scanner was acting up, so Barrett's top speed of 739.666 miles per hour, by the most reliable measure, was only an estimate. Also, he only drove his rocket car across the lake bed once, not twice, as the official record guidelines require. I think once would be more than enough for me. And none of the spectators heard a sonic boom as Barrett zoomed across the course. 1986, Operation Iceman nabs murderer Richard Kuklinski. He was a suspect in several murders, and he was arrested by undercover agents at a truck stop off the New Jersey Turnpike, marking the culmination of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Operation Iceman. Kuklinski had sealed his fate when he showed operative Dominic Holofroni how to poison a person with cyanide. In 1989, The Simpsons first premiered on television with the episode Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. Simpsons roasting on an open fire. 1991, Boris Yeltsin announced the Soviet Union would cease to exist by New Year's Eve. After a long meeting between Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev and President of the Russian Federation Boris Yeltsin, a spokesman for the latter announced that the Soviet Union would officially cease to exist on or before New Year's Eve. Yeltsin declared that there will be no more red flag. In 2003, the third and final Lord of the Rings movie opened. The Return of the King, the final film in the trilogy based on the best-selling fantasy novels by J.R.R. Tolkien, opened in theaters. The film was a huge box office success and won 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Peter Jackson. The Lord of the Rings trilogy became one of the highest-grossing franchises in movie history, netting billions of dollars worldwide in box office proceeds and related merchandise. And I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, links to my research are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to share. While you're here, check out my other channel, 8 Susquehanna. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty, back to work. Okie dokie, Smokey. Let's just rearrange that a little bit. Just read it like it's written. Sometimes when you read the words, it's not quite enough if you haven't put enough words in there to begin with. That's not the way I like to tell it anyway. We don't need all those words. Hope I pronounced that right. So happy for editing. So many edits. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? She's not a man. Did I do this whole thing without a microphone? Dadgummit. Well, this is why I don't do live shows.